The Real Recovery Show. We meet every Friday at noon, and we're over 50 episodes in now. It's been pretty exciting. Meeting a lot of people in recovery, people who have been through a lot, overcome a lot, and a lot of people who have stepped up back into the community and aren't keeping their addiction a secret, so that they can reach the hand out to the most people to help the most people. And those are the people that I gravitate towards because, as you know, obviously, I recover very, very, very out loud. And there's nothing I won't say at the level of anything because I really want to put a voice to all of the secrets and all of the shame and break the stigma and make it such an everyday conversation that everybody's comfortable and more feeling welcome to heal, you know. And today's guest is no exception to that. You may know him from playing in the NHL for over a decade. He was in the Philadelphia Flyers. His name is Therien. And but today he'll talk about that, don't worry, but he'll also talk about his alcoholism and where it took him and what had to happen for him to get help. He's also written a book called The Road to Redemption, and in that book he'll talk about all of that as well. But he's also been doing a lot of advocacy stuff as well to use everything he's learned and what he has at his disposal to help people in his community in Philadelphia and everywhere. So I'm really, really grateful. So thank you for joining us today. We'd love to hear about your journey, especially like how you started out, how you got into hockey, and take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, Lisa, you know what? First off, thanks for having me on. You've done a great job, and I've had people kind of banging down my door to say, hey, you got to get on with Lisa Trevino and the Real Recovery Show. So I actually reached out, and man, I'll tell you what, you answered me back in about 5 minutes, and here we are. So yeah, my story is, I guess at the end of the day, for being a hockey player, it ends up being pretty much. I think you'll find a lot of the same stories. You know, I grew up in the sporting world in hockey. I was born and raised in Ottawa, Canada. My goal as a baby, whether my dad had anointed that decision for me or that road for me, was to be a hockey player and to try to get as far as I could and get to the NHL. And I think my whole life and the journey as a young person, every year playing a new on a new team, trying to stay relevant. It didn't always work out like that, but I'm very much part of a culture of hockey. I ended up making it. I played a long time. I've played, as I said, almost 12 years for the Philadelphia Flyers in one area, which is I'm very, very lucky. But at the same time, with the many wins I've had and the successes I've had as an athlete and as a broadcaster afterwards, as I always tell people, the real dirty little secret that I carried for so many years until I didn't carry it anymore was the fact that I had a severe addiction to alcohol. And, however that came about, it would have been probably in my first 7 or 8 years of the league where it probably increased, but very much part of the culture of the sport and something that, I saw as I grow up and as I grew into the league, and it became part of my identity in a lot of ways until it became my archangel. Like it was awful being, feeling like that, being out of control, disappointing people, and that's how I knew that my journey in life had to change for the betterment. And there's a lot of people that counted on me, including myself, and I just got tired of letting everybody down and sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. And here I am today, with coming up 12 and a half years of sobriety. And every day's a gift. Not perfect, but every day's a gift. And part of what you said in your open was to share, to tell people, hey, this happened to me. It doesn't have to happen to you, but it might. It might happen to you. It might happen to someone you love, a friend, a sibling, a coworker. And, what does that person do about it? And more importantly, what do you do about it? And I think that's part of what my journey is. I was involved in hockey for so long. And in 2020, I got fired essentially from a job that I had for years. It was done. It was, I wasn't expecting it. And as that happened, with the pandemic and, thanks Halloween of 2020, and I'm thinking, man, what am I going to do? I'd only been programmed really to do one thing, and that was to call hockey games, to broadcast hockey, be around my friends. And that was already at that time, had about 9-10 years sober. So what happened was I didn't waste any time. I said, what am I going to do? I'm going to do the most courageous thing I'm going to do. And I'm going to levy my story of recovery and to help others. I know there's, people find work out of it. And I do own 3 centers now in Philadelphia, aftercare centers, mental health, which I've climbed into, we'll talk about. But I fully jumped in. And I think at first people
it does take a
like
lot of courage to write a book about your life, and a lot of people will say, I have a book in me. I could write a book about my life. But when it really comes down to it, you're talking about being super transparent and opening yourself up. If you have any care whatsoever about anybody, what they think, you're putting it out there and you're basically saying, do with this what you will, and trusting your higher power, trusting your path, but more so wanting to be helpful. I feel if that's truly the motive for it, then we can release, what people think. I had to do the same thing with the show. I had to. It took courage, it took courage because I was like, oh God, I'm going to talk about things that, I at first wouldn't even talk about in recovery, to one person, let alone a room full of people, let alone at a podium, let alone now on a microphone, right? So you writing a book and saying, especially because of how well known you are in certain circles, to be able to say, so I know you know me here like this, but at the risk of anybody thinking anything different, I really want to help and show you this, because this is more prevalent than you realize, this alcoholism, and not just in sports, but in everywhere. And so if you're someone who's really super into hockey and you're really super into sports, and you might be suffering from alcoholism, maybe one of your heroes or somebody that you've seen make it can speak to you and say you can get help, and it's not the big deal, the big huge bad thing that you think it is, like that it's much more common than anything. And so I'm very grateful that you've done this, that you have that attitude.
I felt it was my responsibility in a lot of ways, too. And then changing a course correction or a course change in life in terms of, things I'm doing. I was only 47 or 48 at the time when that happened. So again, and I'd had a platform here in Philadelphia, and I knew that there were people struggling. And what I want, Lisa, is for people to have the confidence and the courage to call me. Like, I let people know when I do a video, it's okay. Mm-hmm. You might feel like it's the end of the world in that moment where you're at, but it's not.
Right.
And I'm living proof, and I know you do, are the people that survive this and come out the other side. Making the NHL was cool. There's it's like a 0.001% chance or something like crazy of guys that make it. That's a nice accomplishment. Something that no one will ever take away from me because I played a long time. But when it came down to the nuts and bolts of my life and the things that are meaningful to me, the hardest thing I had to do, but the most gratifying, was laying that story out. And when people call me now and reach out to me and say, hey, I got a problem, I said, you just said the 3 hardest words. I need help. I got a problem. And we'll handle it from there. But I need people to understand that the stigma has to be shaken off. And if it's someone like me that you saw as a celebrity, even though like a minor type of celebrity, a hockey player, we're not in movies on Friday nights and stuff like that, but we become part of your TV, your couch at night. And it was important for me to tell people, because I think there's a lot of people that I'd resonated well with. I didn't sell my soul to anybody in the process. I was a good guy, but I was struck by alcohol. And so now I need to give that back to others to understand that we can destigmatize this. Like, you don't have to go through life feeling like it's the end of it. I want people to understand I can come on a show like this. I can talk for hours, intelligently, thorough. I broadcasted. So all those little things, if you think it's a bump in the road that you have the power and the control to have ultimate control over that situation. You control your destiny. No one else does, and certainly not a substance. And it took me a while to get to that point. Lisa, when I went to rehab, when I'm telling you my story, and I'll show you in the book, like when I went away to rehab my last year in 2006, I went through what I call God's hell to me at the time. My career was over. I was a stone cold alcoholic, drinking every day. On June 17th of 2006, my sister, who I loved beyond words and knew my problems so much and wanted me to stop for my little kids, she passed away from a cardiac event. And 2 weeks later, I'd already called Karen Treatment Center. I was in rehab with a blood alcohol level when I showed up of a 0.63. And I was walking and talking like I was perfectly sober. And as I joked, if a cop had pulled me over on the road at that, he would have said, "Sorry, something's wrong with the machine. Go ahead."
Yeah,
Because it couldn't have looked like that. But when I say, like, for a minute, I was the world's greatest alcoholic, I was the world's greatest alcoholic. And it makes me laugh saying that, but it makes me sick.
Yeah.
You know, that's
the
where my road took me.
The normalcy of it. Yeah. Would you say that that, of course, alcohol and drinking is so much part of the culture of sports too, that not just for the people playing, but the people who are like going and watching it, that, it's very easy if you're around people who are drinking to make it okay for yourself and like to slip over lines that you think, oh, I'm okay. Look, I have tolerance. I can do this and get up the next day and play a sport or do whatever. Do you feel like there were a lot of other, without saying any names, of course, right? Because nobody can diagnose anybody else being an alcoholic. We can only do it for ourselves. But would you say that you saw a lot of alcoholism by your own definition in the sport?
It's a tough one to say. But yeah, I did. I saw addiction. I've seen everything. I mean, that's part of the culture. Certainly with hockey, the sport of hockey, as I said when we started, very much part of the culture of that sport more than others. And sports in general has gone through a transition in many ways as well. It's not like people just started using drugs and alcohol in sports in the last 10 years. There's been an evolution. I could probably trace it back to the 60s and 70s even in sports. I mean, where beer drinking had always been part of the culture of hockey. It had always been go get a beer with your buddies after.
Right.
But the rest of it, then the 80s and 70s, it was like a cocaine with drinking, and then the 90s became more alcohol again, and then pills took over. And then cocaine has kind of spiraled back around again because nobody wants to be test positive for anything anymore. Right. So, and again, I always said, like, guys in sports, I'd love to see nobody do anything, but young people try things.
Right.
And that's, your hope is that nobody gets involved in it. But I'm also a realist.
Right.
And I understand that the pressures that come with playing a sport, I don't think any league is ever really going to truly gauge or be able to tell a player, hey, you can do this or you can't do that. That will be up to that player. But, I just spoke to the Flyers development camp last Tuesday. Actually, it was on the 4th of July. And the goal from the general manager, Danny Briere, and President Keith Jones was, tell me, get in there and let these guys know what happened. Share your story. And the same, very much like I'm doing here. But, and part of it has to be a scare tactic for them, understanding that I was just a normal kid like they were, and this is what happened to me. So I want you to try to avoid having this part of your life, because I do believe after it all is said and done, it takes a hard 10 years to recover. And that's my side of it anyway. Maybe it's different for others, but I always said that. And if you don't have to go through that, then don't.
Do you feel like personally it was the pressure of having that role that you had, of being that very part of that very small percentage of people that were accepted into that having to perform at that level, having to be on? Do you think that personally contributed to, without maybe the tools to be able to handle it?
Yeah, I think so. I do. The more I look back at my life and the journey I was on, I think there was a lot of little, I said, like speed bumps for me, and I had to get over those speed bumps. I think anybody that has a long journey in pro sports will tell you that to get there and stay there requires a lot of individuality within a team. And you have to figure those things out for yourself.
It takes a lot of focus, and it takes a lot of vigilance, and it takes almost a level of obsession, because you have to like make sure you're the best you could possibly be, and you're very attached to the result of doing your best and having the best outcome. And as in recovery, we have to like learn to do our best but let go of the results, and have like a more of like a spiritual like approach to things. Oftentimes, I know for myself, I didn't know to do that. I very much was the steamroller, and there was no letting go of results. And so if something didn't go the way that I needed to, and other people saw that, like, I took it very personally. I was very identified with that. And so my emotionality, my mental state would be affected by that. And I used drugs and alcohol because I couldn't stand the way I felt living psychologically that way. But I can just imagine, somebody who's like so focused and so good at what they're doing, and that they're known, that they're accepted into a team for it, and they need to stay at that level, that the amount of pressure could be something that feeds into that need to, like, you know, self-medicate to, and then becoming dependent upon it.
And I agree with that self-medication part, and I am completely in agreement with that, because that's when I look back at my journey of alcohol, it felt like I was self-medicating. It certainly came to that, you know, and you know, there was trigger points in my game. Like, my last year was by far the worst year I had with alcohol. Before that, I became, in a lot of ways, like a caricature in my own movie at times. I was well liked by my teammates. I was a good guy in the locker room. You know, I wasn't a problem for anybody.
Yeah.
And those are things they ask of guys in a locker room, to just be a good teammate. And you know, when I had to drink my last year during a game, that was kind of, to me, just broke my spirit in half. And I realized, like, wow, this is how sick I really am. And the worst part was my game got better when I drank, which is just pathetic. And so, you know, there's so much, like, Lisa, and I know you're saying it, like,
I don't know. I don't know if it is pathetic. I feel like if it's something that's interwoven in how we function, it's like it's taking something out of how we function. It makes it really difficult to adjust. I think it's just natural that there was a dependency, an interdependency woven in that, you know, and when we stop doing a thing, it's going to affect everything. It's like, it's going to affect everything, you know. So did you do alcohol and drugs, or just alcohol? Like,
just alcohol. Yeah, I mean, I was a guy raised in the 80s. You know, have a beer with your teammates, but drugs will kill you. Don't do them. And I'm like, okay, I live by those standards. It's kind of funny how it went, and I never did them. I mean, I was in an era where I knew other guys did, so I've never did a line of cocaine in my life. And that's, people are like, really? I'm like, never one.
I'm surprised too, because sometimes with the intensity of hockey, like, I would think that people might be doing a thing, but no, that's, I guess.
And I was just that guy. And it was funny. Like, I almost had my own, like, kind of like stopgap. Like, you can't do this. This is crossing the line. But, you know, again, like, when I look back now in the industry I'm in, you know, Pennsylvania Recovery Center here in this area, and Pennsylvania Behavioral Health Center, we deal with all kinds of different cases and of people and the way they live. And I see it, and I just see how destructive alcohol really is. And the worst part of alcohol, you can just get it on any street corner.
Yeah.
Which it's just it's still so prevalent, Lisa, and it's still, you know, it's still sold to millions and millions and hundreds of millions of people around the world every day, like it's nothing.
Oh, even in the pandemic, oh my God, so many people were getting it shipped to their house. Like, it was crazy. Huge amounts of alcohol, like as if they're having a party. It was crazy.
It was, and it kept, but, you know, they had to keep people alive at the other side of things, where liquor stores are open. And, you know, people are like, how could they keep liquor stores open? I totally understood it for people that are still actively using. If you don't have it, you'll die. And that's the part, like, for me, like, drinking during a game, it wasn't about, like, I'm just going to be cool.
Yeah, if you don't have tools on how to live your life, and you have no idea how to handle life on life's terms, and you have stuff that's built up, and you're uncomfortable in your own skin, and something like COVID hits, you're going to need to do the things you've been doing to self-medicate unless you find another way. And
correct.
So, yeah. So, okay. And so, when your sister passed away, that was like a pivotal moment for you.
You know, it's really weird, because I was already a full-blown alcoholic at the time. Like I always say, you know, people ask, oh, did your sister's death push you? It didn't push me over. I was already there. Like, right. I told her, and it was funny before. So she had the episode happen on June 11th of 2006. And, you know, my parents were down visiting. My sister was at home, and it was, you know, I was already going away the following week. And then, you know, we found out what had happened. She was on a life support for a week, and she passed away on the 17th. And I'm like, this can't be, like, what's going on in my life. And I was sick, and I mean, I'm drinking, like, just numbing myself to get through the ordeal of her funeral. And then when I got back to, you know, I had to go back to the United States, and, you know, I called the league again, and that's when I went back to Karen. I mean, I wasn't going to put it off, but, you know, 2 weeks after her funeral, and there I was at Karen, trying to get help. And it was a really strange time in my life, because I didn't know who I was anymore, and I wasn't sure what the world had held for me. And I was
very
lost.
disorienting.
My career was over. Yeah. My career was over. My friends were gone. I was an alcoholic. My best friend and my sister was gone. Everybody else looked down on me, and I was alone. My wife at the time was pregnant for my now fourth child, my son Chris, who's been an absolute blessing. I had three little girls who I adored, and I just needed to be better. And but the good part is I did, like, when I got through this, I went through probably three good years of hell. And there was an NHL work stoppage in there in 2004. We didn't play for a whole year because of a labor dispute. And that did not help me at all. That just kept me at home all year, just drinking and doing nothing.
Oh, yeah.
Waiting. And that sucked.
Nothing like isolation. Yeah.
It is. But really the whole focus was at the end was my little girls, and I was a guy that tried to do so much, even as an alcoholic. I wasn't drunk every day, but I wanted to be the best dad. And even if I gave 150% of what I was in that state, it was only 60% of what the real person was. And so, as I said, my oldest will be 24 now. She's the one that has seen the most. And all I can do is make continual amends by staying sober one day at a time. And that's what I do. I looked at those kids, and I tell you, the win out of this, Lisa, was the rewards I got for those decisions. When I stopped, it was 2011, February 7, 2011. I'd had years of sobriety before that, and I had some hiccups leading up to that point. But when I saw my girls, and my son was 5 at the last time, and I was broadcasting, and I was kind of keeping it to myself, I never got back to the levels I picked up again after I went to Karen. Had 2 years, and I realized, like, you can get sober for whatever reason you want, but mine was my kids, and that's was what my higher power was at the beginning for me, was my children. And I tell people that the rewards that I have reaped from that decision, and the smiles that I've seen those kids have, and the joy and the friendships that they developed has been remarkable to me. They've been incredible basketball players, some of the best in the state of New Jersey has ever seen. And I always tell people it's hard to do that with an alcoholic parent. And so that was my win, was me stopping, so I get to see those kids go on and play Division I basketball.
Nice.
My son is an amazing young man. He's 16 now, and is a lot like his dad. But I want him to understand too, like, there's a way better world out there than what I had to deal with at 35 to get clean. So those are my wins, and those are the greatest things in my life for my 4 kids. And you know what? I love them, and that was really for them. But I don't have those stories. I don't know if you remember, there's a movie called Hoosiers. I tell it every time I talk in the 80s. It's with Dennis Hopper.
I remember that movie. Yeah.
Yeah, and when the kid went into the gym, I don't know if you remember the scene. There was father, Dennis Hopper, went in the gym completely loaded, and his son was playing basketball. And I remember all the embarrassment that kid. I could feel it on the screen. And I thought to myself, this will never happen. I will never allow this to happen. And it never did. And so for me, that's how I ended up getting my piece out of it. And, life's still not perfect. It's not always great. Right. But I don't drink. And I think that's the part at the end, is that, and we talked about higher power a little bit before, Lisa. That ended up being for me what I needed at the time. I said, if you can't do it for yourself, do it for them. And then ultimately I realized that the only way I could do it for them was really to do it for me. And that's the hard part. People have to understand, you got to be selfish in recovery, because that's the only way that you can send it off to other people.
Yeah, that's oftentimes something that, people say, well, you have to do it for yourself, but you are doing it for yourself because you want to be the father that sees the smile reflected back to you. And
right.
And also, when we stop drinking or doing drugs, a lot of people think that that was the problem, right? You just got to stop drinking and stop doing drugs, and then things should be good. You should straighten out. Everything should be fine. But going raw, going without alcohol or drugs, going without my medicine, that's when I have this person I want to be. I have this person I don't want to be anymore, and I can't go forward with alcohol and drugs. And so, I have to now level up. I have to keep leveling up. Do you feel like maybe at all the way that you were about sports and honing your craft, so to speak, that focus, do you feel like you're using and channeling that same focus now into your recovery and helping people?
Yeah, well, I think there's a shift for sure in terms of what people do and the way they perceive things. It was funny because sharing your story to me has to be the most important part, I think, of recovery for anybody, because you can't help someone else unless you do share the struggles that you've been in.
Yeah.
When I think everybody looks for hope, and everybody maybe pain loves pleasure sometimes in different ways. And I remember when I was trying to get sober, I went on some website. It was probably like 2005, and I'm like, famous celebrity alcoholics. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you know what? Misery just likes company. And I thought to myself, I went on, and there was like hundreds of them listed.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, became a normalcy, just seeing that. I didn't know their story. I didn't know anything about them. I mean, I saw names on there, prominent actors that had come out. I wasn't aware of it. But when I saw that, it gave me something to say, wow, like they did it.
Right.
They did it. And that's the part now, I don't let anybody tell me they can't do it. When you show up at rehab with a 0.63 blood alcohol level, you can do this. If I did it, you can do it. And that's part of the message. Like, I really want to rip the Band-Aid off this, the addiction and the stigma, because it's so bad the way people view themselves. And we don't do the same for people that struggle with a real, like a legit
cancer
medical
or whatever. It's a really
problem,
good point
right?
what you said too, because nobody can really help an alcoholic but another alcoholic, right? Somebody who's been there, because we all think we're terminally unique and nobody will understand. You would drink if you had my problems or my life or my headspace or my childhood or blah blah blah, and I just, I'm different and I can't relate. And so it's when one person tells their story to another person, and then you hear enough of your story in another person, and you see that they're actually smiling and they're happy, and you're not, and they're talking about their past, and that's your current state. And now you have, wow, like if they could do it, I can too. But now what's so cool about this, what you're saying, is it takes that basic but very important ingredient, most important ingredient in recovery, right? The power of seeing yourself in another person and being able to share your experience, strength, and hope. But it takes it now, it blows past the stigma, and it says, look, I do this for a living, and I'm an alcoholic, and I'm in recovery. So whatever it is that you think, whether you're a doctor and you find out that you've met other doctors in recovery, or you're an actor and et cetera. It's like there's been this thing for a long time where because of the 12-step recovery model and the anonymity ingredient of, not mentioning you're in any particular 12-step program at the level of press, radio, TV, and films, which I completely respect 100% and will never out somebody or even say anything about anything I've ever done. That's not, but there is recovery, and recovery is the thinking, the life, the change, the principles now, what I've experienced, how I've healed, what I've realized about my life, how I can live my life on life's terms now and be comfortable in my own skin, going from who I was to who I am now. And it is not a secret. We are not a secret society. Many, many people are now stepping out and living out loud when it comes to recovery, and it's been like, oh my God, that celebrity is saying that they're blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, if they're saying they're in Alcoholics Anonymous, that's the only ick about it. But if they're saying they're in recovery, that they also have had to fight their inner demons and wake up, well, good, because people should be talking about it rather than glorifying the alcohol and the drugs and the party lifestyle, right? Showing what happens after. I'll say this last thing. A lot of people, you see all the party and the this and they're so cool or whatever, and then when they go and they get help, for a long time they would just disappear, like they would stop acting, or they would stop doing things, or they would leave whatever they were doing, and then you just wouldn't hear about them for a while, like whatever happened to so and so, and so all of this recovery was happening in secrecy, and people were thinking that nobody's recovering, and so more and more people are stepping up now, and I love to hear that, because that's how we're going to break the stigma, right?
It is. It takes a group of people, but I do think it's going away in a lot of ways, Lisa. I do feel like people like us are actually kind of not whacking the stigma off it a little bit, and it'll take time. But I think people are understanding that. Like there was an association before where, I go back into the 70s. I remember you'd hear about one alcoholic parent. Nobody ever and it was like, oh my God, you hear about so-and-so's dad's an alcoholic, and it's like
just one.
But that's the lie, right? Like that's the part of society and growth in society, in a lot of ways, it's changed. Because of course I know now that there was probably a third of the team that had alcoholic parents or more, especially in the hockey culture. So again, I'm not throwing anyone under the bus, but that's how time has changed, because there was one. Nobody wanted to say it. So how many people have been living in pain because of the stigma that's been attached to addiction?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what else breaks the stigma, which I love, and you haven't even said it, but I know this about you by the way that you're speaking, that you're not carrying shame about it. You know, that you don't feel like embarrassed and you need to hide it, because I don't carry any shame about it either. All the alcohol, all the drugs, all the stuff, all the homelessness, all the things I did, because, you know, if I have shame and I tell you about my story, then how do I help you let go of your shame? But if I've healed this and I realize, like, this is just stuff that I was doing because I was uncomfortable in my own skin and I didn't have tools, you know, and I got really, really sick and it nearly killed me twice. And so, but there's a solution. There's a way to rise up over this and to heal. And, you know, that we're not bad people trying to be good. We're sick people trying to get well. And that it's just that it's just programming. It's just experience. And there's no reason to hold on to that shame. And by breaking the shame of it and talking about it and being like, listen, it's no big deal now to me. I used to be embarrassed about it, but I'm not anymore because I see what it is. That message, that energy that you have, that energy helps people question how big a deal maybe it might be for them, and that maybe, just maybe, they can get help, because maybe it's not unsurmountable. Maybe it's not the huge stigma that they've been afraid to ask for help because they're afraid of getting judged or rejected or told, you know, what's wrong with you? Like, you should be able to, like, live life better than this.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, and again, when you go back to the beginning, we were just talking about, you know, having the courage to do it. You can't do this, you know, half-ass. It's just not. There's nothing in the cards to help by just sharing part of it. I mean, when I do share and I speak a lot, you know, I have to have people understand the pain that I was in, for them to get a grasp of what happened. And I think the biggest thing is understanding why somebody becomes addicted to stuff, you know, and there's a lot of reasons. It could go back to trauma. There's a lot of trauma we find involved, life experiences, and it could be the smallest thing, right? Like just a snap of a finger thing that changes your thinking or your way of thinking and how you process. And that's how the alcohol comes on, or at least how addiction came on for me, because I can gradually trace back my steps in a slow crawl pace, you know, until it was crawling, walking, jogging, and then it was running at the end. And so that's really where I was. But there's no, for me now, like, I don't, you know, someone's going to judge me no matter what I do anyway.
Right.
So yeah, it doesn't matter. They're going to call me. So I mean, it doesn't matter. That's just the way in the world we live in. So I may as well lay it all out there, because more people are going to celebrate that anyhow. And I'm, like I said, I'm over 50 now. I don't give too many shits anymore about what people think of me. And
me too. I was walking with somebody last night who was like concerned about what people think, and I was walking with him, and I said, you know, I'm going to tell you a secret. I know it's going to come as a shock to you, but not everybody likes me. And I started laughing. I was like, wow, it's just like, and you know what? It doesn't matter, because that's their story. That's their stuff that they're projecting. It doesn't even matter. And there was a time where I was like gripped by that. Like, oh my God, the idea that one person doesn't like me and I have to make sure I'm so perfect. And just that idea that you have to be perfect can make, just that alone can make you so uncomfortable in your own skin that you need a drink. It's just, to live like that, to be able to let go of all of that and to live your truth, and to express that to people, that it's okay. I give you permission to live your truth by my living my own truth and letting it go.
Yeah. So, and that is true. I mean, you know, I can't worry about what other people think, you know, but you know, if people want to listen to us, if they want to, you know, if they want to have sobriety, if they want to have a chance at it, I always tell them, give it a listen to what I'm trying to sell. There's nothing in it for me. Right. Except your well-being, you know, at the end of the day. I mean, yeah, I help people, I have a business, but I mean, we never leave anyone behind. You know, if we can't take somebody, we find somewhere to go. But my story has to be the part that they understand and hear, because I'm not going to give up on anybody that comes in. I'm lucky enough that I had a couple of really good people that were there for me. And, they made all the difference. I tell other people too, Lisa, too, if you're in early sobriety, and this is another part, like it's to me, it's the most important part, I think, is that first few months up to 2 years. I always say if you can get to 2 years and really work your thing, you're going to have a really good chance at sobriety. I had a hiccup at a 2-year point before, and I don't know why it felt like I was leading up to it. But if you're doing the right things, if you're doing your meetings, if you're meeting with your sponsor, if you're hanging around sober people, those things won't happen. And that was a difference the first time to the second time when I got sober for good, was the people, places, and things also making a commitment. It doesn't require a huge commitment. It requires a commitment.
It requires all in. Okay, so at this point, we're just going to take a quick break to go to commercial. Yep. Please remember that the opinions expressed here are strictly those of the people who gave them and do not represent any 12-step program or should replace your own intuition or professional medical advice. We'll see you in a bit. The Meeting Space is a facility with over 100 weekly recovery meetings for addiction from alcohol, drugs, sex, food, gambling, codependency, and PTSD. When someone is scared to go to their first meeting, we walk them through the process, ask them and answer questions to assuage their concerns. Many are court-ordered to attend, and we provide free court papers and teach them the process. Our glass-enclosed, soundproof children's playroom enables parents to be in a meeting while watching their children. We have healing workshops, craft fairs, and special authors who come to teach and sit with our fellowships. During COVID, we were declared an essential business by the County Commissioner's Office. We were kept open so that we can continue our daily work with traumatized chronic relapsers and those who would have used alcohol or drugs in isolation. Local businesses rent our space as well to financially help with this mission, and they get to have a great location for their business meeting or training. The recovery store in the center of our facility provides literature, clothing, medallions, and custom gifts to encourage, aid in, and celebrate a person's recovery from alcohol, drugs, PTSD, or unhealthy behaviors. Both the recovery store and the meeting space are open every day, including holidays. Saving lives, educating the community, reducing social stigma, providing a safe place for people to heal. Our nonprofit is supported entirely by donations by people like you who want everyone to have a place to go to heal. Welcome back to The Real Recovery Show. You can watch us on Facebook, YouTube, on Amazon Fire TV. You can listen to us on the PHLV radio app. You can get our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. We have our own YouTube channel now that we've been putting all of our episodes on. And you can go to themeetingspace.com. Make sure you type the word "the" in first. And you can see all of our episodes there. And if you're interested in being on a future episode, please fill out an intake form or contact us through the contact form. Or if you have any suggestions for somebody that you would love to see on the show, where we would love to have powerful voices come and share their experience, strength, and hope. And before the break, we were talking about recovery and and the kind of mindset that you need. And so welcome back. We're here with with Chris again, and really, so how has life been now that you've been in recovery? Has it all been smooth sailing?
There's good. There's certainly, when you eliminate the kind of lifestyle there was, it can only go up from there. But luckily my story, Lisa, there's a lot of good in it. There's a lot of good heart involved in my story too. Luckily when I got done playing hockey, I guess I left enough of an impression that people had said, hey, it's a good guy that's been struggling and we'll give him a chance. So I did radio. Yeah. And then I went to TV, so I had a great career after hockey, and really my journey with the Flyers and people having an understanding that this is a guy that we need, that's been here a long time, and they did the right thing. So I'm forever grateful for that, and I was able to recover with people around me that cared about me, but I also learned to care about myself too. Yeah. And how's life? Life is good. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. And again, I say that because there's a lot of great days, but if you think because you're in your
Right.
addiction, you've stopped it, that things are going to automatically be like you're living in fantasy land and there's a money tree there and
Yeah.
everything's going to go away. It doesn't.
All the
It
cash and
means that-
prizes. Yeah.
yeah, and so I always tell people like prepare to work at life because now you really are going to have to face things on your own, and there's challenges that are involved. There's life hurdles that come about, that things you can't foresee. You can't prepare for it sometimes. So that's, I think the pandemic for me, 2023, we're 3 years now when it started. That was a challenge.
Yeah.
For me, it was a personal challenge. It was, it was out of my element. I'd lost, the work I knew. I was trying to restart a business, doing with Pennsylvania Recovery Center and getting somewhere for people to go get help. But personally, no, there's days you're going to deal with things that are hard. And that's what the sobriety for me, Lisa, I think is important. And I don't know how you feel about it.
But that's like also really important is that, when all that happened with COVID, it was two ways to see it, right? It was, oh my God, this is outrageous, scary, and overwhelming. And what a big shake to our life snow globe. On the other hand, there were people that were reevaluating their lives and their relationships and what they're doing and spending more time focusing on sorting out some of that stuff. It's like it's like when your life is busy focusing on this, focusing on that, working, going here, doing this, blah, 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 and everybody gets sent to their room, their house, to go in quarantine. So a lot of people were finding it really like, who am I? What am I? What am I doing? What do I value? Who am I married to? What's happening? I don't even like this person. I have to live with them. I have to stay in this house in quarantine. And so it seems like, oh my God, this is like such a horrible thing. But on a spiritual level, I really believe that this was something that helped people, much like for us alcoholics, bottoming from alcohol and drugs and having to have like a big shift in our focus and priorities in our life, or somebody who is facing a life-threatening illness or maybe goes through a near-death experience and having like oh my God, what am I doing? Or even just a midlife crisis that happens too. I'm 52 years old. I know about that stuff too. But that's what COVID did. COVID literally invited everyone to like be a little bit more still and a little bit more present and a little bit more aware, and so lots of changes happened during that that time.
And
people
it's happened to a lot of people in recovery. But I didn't, what's funny, like I didn't drink, I didn't pick up at all, and you know what, and then COVID tested people especially people in recovery. People that had, and it's amazing if you didn't have a real firm grasp of your own recovery program. You could have gotten bit by it because I saw it, Lisa, all the time.
Especially with everybody going to Zoom. And then
yes.
only certain places having, because we were declared an essential business, and we were only allowed 10 people per room, and all the chairs had to be spread out. So we got all the people who were chronic relapsers, PTSD, homeless, people who were having like the most difficult time in isolation. So we got a lot of that, and we had old timers, coming to the meeting space to around the clock be there for that, even though a lot of the old timers were older and felt more at risk of getting sick from COVID. So like that's just all of that, so and that's a really good point, right? Like, it's not that life is, alcohol didn't make our life bad. It was alcohol, why we used it and how we used it, that made our life worse. It's not going to be the solution to just stop drinking. It has to be that the thinking changes and the way we look at things. And like you said, if we're not doing the work to heal that thinking and make sure we have a strong support system around us, and actively using tools, then when some fecal matter hits an oscillating device like COVID or something,
There's one other part too I actually want to talk to you about. I was going to ask you about it because, you mentioned something like the chronic relapser. And it's funny because I live in a world where it's complete abstinence from alcohol.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, I was that guy for
Me
about
too.
3 years.
Yeah.
And it tortured my soul
Yeah.
more than anything, than even when I got sober. So I just want people to know, and I'm not giving you a pass, I'm not saying that, but I want you to know I understand.
Yeah.
And it's very much part of the recovery process. You can have a broken heart being a chronic relapser, and you're trying your ass off and you just can't get it.
Right.
If you keep staying vigilant and true and you find your purpose, you will get through that, I promise you. But I was wondering what you thought of that, Lisa, because
Yeah.
it's very prevalent and it exists more than people want to admit.
If
But it's
I
very
believed
prevalent.
that, if I believed that people who relapse can't get sober, I wouldn't be doing what I do for a living, because I've seen the third try or the fourth try stick, and stick for a really long time. And sometimes it's just a lot of PTSD and a lot of isolation, and a person just needs to get to that place where something deeper shifts, and that's it, and so. And not just that, but like sometimes people are in recovery for one drug or one behavior, and there's another seat on the Titanic being sat in, and so
Yeah.
I just have a more general view of it. And as long as you keep doing the next right thing and you sincerely give your best try, it might take. And you know what else though? It might not. There are people that get sober once and stay sober. So it doesn't have to be part of your story. But if it is part of your story, then there's more healing, more stuff that needs to be looked at, and it's an invitation to do that. Because, and I will say this last thing on that subject is that, let's say you go to rehab, or you have a little bit of recovery and then you relapse, right? Well, even though alcohol picks up where it left off, your recovery doesn't get completely wiped. There's still a head full of recovery, and your behavior is being affected. It ruins drinking just a little bit more, that you're just a little bit more awake. You just remember that there was a time when you felt peace, and that you could have peace again, and that there is a solution. And so it doesn't just completely wipe it out. It's just that now, whatever it is that's really been, recovered is stays with you, and other stuff though might need to be worked out just more, and find out what's going on. Where is it that you're not your own best advocate? Where is it that your thinking is causing you to be so uncomfortable in your own skin that you need to self-medicate? What is really going on? And maybe you wouldn't have even seen that thing because you needed to heal all this other stuff first, just to be able to clear the way, relapse for a second, and then see, oh, this is a bigger issue than I gave it credit for. I need to really look at this and go a little bit deeper. And so, I don't know, to look at it from the outside and to see relapses, it doesn't really give the deeper picture of what's really going on. Are you sincerely trying to heal? And if you're sincerely trying to heal, it may take a couple of tries. You're in sports. How many times did you F up trying to accomplish a goal, right? How many times did you have to learn and adjust, that you didn't actually, you were not able to do what you really set your mind to, and then you had to reevaluate and work on it and get better at that, right?
Yeah.
Well, recovery is like that too. It's not this thing where you're going to get this like award, good job for your recovery. It's more like this is what we do to heal, to have an actual chance at freedom, to have a real life, to be of maximum service to other people, to be able to have relationships, to be comfortable in our own skin, to not kill ourselves every day.
Yeah, I agree. And no, it's just a huge part. I know, like I said, I wrote a book and I put out last year, Road to Redemption. But one of the things in it really was, which I talk about, was my my journey with relapse, and how how you can I always worry that you can squash somebody's attempt at recovery, because if they do pick up, let's say they have as I say, I call it a 98%er. That's sober 98% of the time, but it's a 2%, and unfortunately the whole world that is around him judges him for that 2%.
Right.
And so that's part of my story in there. And I think in a lot of ways that really busted me up in a lot of ways because I felt like for 3 or 4 years of my life, the entire world was watching me. Every step I took, everywhere I went. And that takes a lot out of a person. And that's why I'm always vigilant of the person that's trying so hard, wants to get it for good, but isn't just there yet. So that's why one of the issues, things I talk about, because that's where I was. I have a little bit of that.
I have a little bit of that too. I do not have the level of people knowing who I am like you do, but I'm pretty well known now in this community of, for all the things I do, and I lead with the chin. I do the show, and I have the meeting space, and I'm a very strong advocate for people to heal, and so I recover out loud, and so I, call it vanity, but I also I really don't want to show my ass. I really, really, really want to keep doing better. And so it's how God works for me. He he'll make me go, oh, you know what? I need to heal this. I need to heal this because I have to be an example. And I do feel like I could be watched more than the other person, if I screw up, I do a thing, That's why dating is quite interesting because you just, but that's a whole other thing. But anyway, so yeah, I think I always wondered about people, in some sort of celebrity kind of position, how do you turn that off, not care anymore, really not care, because everybody on some level who has addiction, in my opinion, is it's one of the fears, right? You have a fear of losing something, fear of not getting something, and fear of not being liked, fear of not being accepted, fear of abandonment. If everybody has that to some degree, even if they won't admit it, I could just imagine that's on steroids if they are someone who is on TV or in their face.
You know what? I'm going to say this, and this is the part for me where I found my hope again in a lot of things. When I shared my story, it was it was 2020, and it was a front spread 2-page article in the Sports the Inquirer that a good guy, Sam Carchidi, who's been a writer here for a long time, did. And I was petrified. I didn't know what I was doing. And I'll tell you one thing, the love and support I got out of that announcement, sharing what I'm doing and continuing on it now. I think people are initially like, oh my God, wow, that I had no idea, to holy shit, this can happen to anybody. And for 3 years, I've continually told my story. I continue to tell my story. I keep letting people know it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
If you let it be okay, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And the one thing I promise you, the best trait, Lisa, that I've had out of my hockey career, and the one thing in my life that I cherish more than anything is my loyalty and how much I love the people that have been there for me and how I'll go through the wall for them. So if you call me and you say, Chris, I'm struggling, I need help, I got your back, and I'll have your back all the way till the end, one way or another. So that's the messaging I got, and I want people to know, I played here, and I grew up essentially on people's TVs from the age of 22 till the age of 48, from a player and a broadcaster. And I always said, I thank the people of the Delaware Valley, Philadelphia, or people in general, for just saying, hey, it's okay, man, we got you. And that was something I needed and I didn't know. But if you want to share your story, do it.
Yeah.
Because you're going to get a lot more love and support out of it than you are people calling you some drunk or you're an idiot or whatever. I don't even care about that, because I won the day. And I continue to win every day as long as I stay sober. And the people that care about me and love me are the ones that are going to be the beneficiaries of that.
I love that. That's beautiful. That's beautiful because it's the love, it's the sincere caring, it's the wanting somebody else's highest good that can let a person know that, maybe they're not alone, and the appreciation for the people in your life. It's a great way to live anyway, in gratitude and appreciation for anything that anybody does, and people feel that way. And so now you're an owner and a partner in the Pennsylvania Recovery Center and the Pennsylvania Behavioral Health Center. You want to talk a little bit about that?
You know what? Great. I have a great partner, a guy named Brant Norton. We have he's a great guy. The first year we actually started it, we kind of had it was a trial and error thing. I have another good friend, Paul Cates from North Jersey, did this with me. He's just a tremendous human being. Guy I sat with at Philadelphia Eagles games, and that's how we started. But we got into it. He believed in my vision. Helped me get this thing started. We merged with Pennsylvania Recovery Center as we started off as something different.
Nice.
Gone through the trials of being a business owner, but we're in a really good spot. We're really helping a lot of people. We got a lot of sober living. If addiction is your thing, we got you covered. If it's mental health, which we're, of course, Lisa, we're getting a lot of calls with that.
Right.
People struggling just in every walk of life. And so we're really proud that opened a couple months ago. Pennsylvania Behavioral Health got a whole team of clinicians, therapists, counselors, and like you said, a whole lot of love and a lot of support and a lot of really great people that I believe in. And we know that those conditions are going to be conducive for people to get into our sober living, come to our centers, and get yourself started, get yourself on the road to recovery, and realize that there's a way better life out there waiting for you.
That's beautiful. And so, what is your website? BundyRecovery.com?
Yeah. And also, and so to kind of couple it, that's the best part is I said, man, we're getting calls. People are trying to get me on Facebook or however through a friend. And I said, you know what, guys? You can do that if you want to get me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. If you're a friend, I said, if you're not a friend, we'll become friends really quickly. But otherwise, go to Bundy Recovery. Bundy was my nickname. It's after Al, not Ted, just to let everybody know.
Right.
And Bundy Recovery, BUNDY recovery.com, bundyrecovery.com. And you can fill in the sheet. Let us know what's ailing you, and we'll get you the support we need. If it's somebody in Las Vegas that does it, then I'm probably going to send them to Lisa Trevino. So that's how it works essentially with Bundy Recovery, because I can't treat somebody in Vegas here in Philadelphia, but it's essentially become a call center in a lot of ways, and we're really proud of it. And I have
network.
the Therien Foundation, which
beautiful.
I think will be my legacy point, making money, try to help people get a start in recovery.
That's really great. And I know you're super passionate about helping be an example and going back and talking to teams and stuff, and and helping them to recognize, hey, this happened to me. Just stay true to what you're doing.
It didn't get any better than July 4th with the Flyers, me going back to the place that I was my home for many years, and letting those young guys know, as I was 30 years ago walking in there, hey guys, here's some ways to treat yourself like a pro, but here's some little things to watch out for.
Yeah.
I've talked to the Washington Capitals group last year, the Hershey Bears, and getting the message out to other athletes, of course, in the world that I've lived in, is super important as well.
I think that's so powerful, because who's going to listen to somebody who's not doing what they're doing, and
Correct.
The fact that you can speak from your experience and say, I did all this and I also had this, and so you could do this without that experience, so watch out for that, and if you need help, if something is going on, don't be ashamed to get help before it's too late,
Just be aware it's out there, addiction's out there, and you can be taken by it if you don't guard yourself against it or understand what causes addiction. So that's my messaging, Lisa, in a nutshell, and I'm not stopping. I'm going to continue barking and yelling from the rooftops. And continue with a smile doing it. It doesn't have to, this is not a miserable process. It's a process of love and commitment. But I'll tell you what, the feeling and elation of getting sober, staying sober, the lives that you'll change, including your own, it's incomparable. Yeah.
There is no life without, for me, there's no life without sobriety, without recovery. First of all, I physically wouldn't be alive today. But
I'd be dead, yeah.
But life to me is more than just being able to walk around and do stuff. Life to me is being inspired and feeling a connection and seeing the light go on in somebody else's eyes, and know that I just left a situation better than I found it, that I just affected somebody, in a way that I needed to be affected. I needed to hear this stuff. When I was broken and I didn't have any solution, I needed to hear somebody like me speaking. So the more that we speak, the more that we do this, then the more people like you are willing to go, you know what? I'm just like everybody else. Alcoholism does not play favorites. It doesn't say, oh, well, because you're in the NHL, you won't be an alcoholic, or because you're this, you won't be an alcoholic. alcoholism is everywhere, and it needs to be treated. And it doesn't need to be a big bad boogeyman, because people like you are getting sober every day. So thank you so much for joining us. And
thank you.
What is your sobriety date?
It's February 7th, 2011. I always tell people my whole story's in here. Get the book. It's a great read. It's got some good hockey stories, Lisa, but it's also got great recovery parts in it as well.
Okay. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us today on The Real Recovery Show. We'd like to give a special thanks to our sponsor and gracious host, PHLV Radio here in Las Vegas. See you next week.